as you may notice, today's video is going to be entirely in English. And the reason for that is that I did an interview with Anthony Jacquin. Now, if you're not familiar with Anthony's work, he is a hypnotist and also a hypnotherapist, but he's quite well known within the magic and mentalism community for the way he combines a very modern style of hypnosis with much more traditional magic and mentalism. So you might be familiar with his book, Reality is Plastic, or some of his DVD projects like the Trilby Connection and the Manchurian approach. So if you're not familiar with those, I'll leave the links in the description below here, so you can check those out if you'd like. We spoke about several subjects, like some of the theory behind hypnosis, why does it work, what is the science behind it, a lot of advice about how do you combine hypnosis with magic and mentalism as a performer, and also a lot of tips for beginners. So how do you get started in hypnosis, what are some of the common pitfalls, and just what are the essential building blocks, what do you need to focus on to get started. So it was a long interview, about 45 minutes, but there's a lot of good information in there. So I broke it up into 3 pieces, the first of which you'll be watching in a moment, and the second and third I'll be releasing in a couple of days. So stay tuned for that, and for now let's get into the interview. So we're here once again in Amsterdam. For those people who don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Maybe we'll start with how you get started in hypnosis yourself.
Okay, well that would be quite some time ago now. Back in 1995, my father took an interest in hypnosis. Hypnotherapy was the kind of focus. I got the bug for that.
Right.
Basically, he started helping people change, even though he didn't know too much about it at the time. I was living in Paris, and he sent me a letter. I've still got this letter saying, "I feel like I'm wearing an invisible cloak."
I know the feeling.
Yeah. So you don't quite understand this seeming power that you're wielding, but you're just saying words and things are happening. So that got me interested. When I came back to the UK, he taught me what he knew, gave me some sheets of paper. I started kind of reading it. It was all therapy based. Then around 2001 I started developing an interest in magic, so pretty late in life. And certainly like many people around that time, David Blaine was an inspiration, and even more so Derren Brown in the UK.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And his very first series, when he presented what he did, he kind of put some distance between himself and traditional magic, kind of tricks, and suggested there was some psychology and suggestion involved. He didn't explicitly say hypnosis. I had no idea what mentalism was at the time. I just kind of believed everything he was doing was what he was doing. A couple of weeks later, I'd started to see that, so as well as the stuff I knew a little about, you can mix your methods, kind of take a by any means necessary attitude to giving people experiences and entertaining them and ultimately helping them. So I started hypnotizing in 95. I got into magic 2001. I started performing professionally in about 2004.
So did you start out with magic, or was it already a blend of mentalism and
to be honest,
hypnosis?
right from the start, the first opportunities I got to do gigs, for companies and things like that, I would be introduced as a hypnotist, and I still am. I'm quite happy to be introduced as a hypnotist and then get a packet of cards out. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just there to entertain.
Right.
So I don't, I'm not kind of fixed in exactly where these boundaries are. In terms of the public, they just, if I say I'm a hypnotist and then I read their mind or put a thought in their mind or appear to kind of play, some of the games that mentalists play, and then I hypnotize someone and I stick them to the floor or make them forget their name or blend the two together, there's no real need to explain what I am and what I'm doing. People are just kind of like, what is that? Is that hypnosis? Or wow, that's hypnosis. So right from the start, my magic, I would say, was kind of strictly mentalism. And even now, most of the magic work that I do is close-up mentalism and hypnosis. So cool. That's essentially what I do. When I'm on stage, not exclusively, but more often than not, it's just hypnotism.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to the performance part of hypnosis in a bit. one of the questions that's always interesting to ask a hypnotist is, how do you see hypnotism? What is it? How would you explain the phenomena of hypnosis in a short way?
That's a good one, because
I know,
it's a good question, because as you, I'm sure, are aware, it's a kind of endless debate.
Right.
Because amongst experts, and by that I mean practitioners and academics, who are often kind of ignored, but the people who are really interested in looking at the nature of this thing, there is no consensus on what hypnosis is.
Right.
So there are some very strong theories suggesting it's a special kind of state, and we have this process to put you in this special state. In this special state you become more receptive. And there are people that, instead of that, emphasise the social dynamics, the kind of pressure, the prestige, all these kind of suggestions that mean you drop into a certain role. And I think we can learn something from both, but where I'm at, kind of in the middle, I have a non-state view of hypnosis. So what that means is, as much as we can give suggestions that might be sleep or trance or deeper, that appear to put someone in a state,
right,
I believe those things are just suggestions. They're no different from magnets and lighter and stuck or forgotten.
Right.
They're the same thing. It's just that we often behave like that part of our process creates something special, and then the person is more receptive to the suggestions that follow it. My view is that the person is always receptive to the suggestions. That's why they responded to sleep and trance and deeper.
Right.
They're always on. Yes, we vary as subjects. So, to try and put that in a definition, what's important here is to understand the word suggestion. Suggestion to me has a very particular meaning. It's different from, should we go for a beer, or, would you like a cup of tea? And what makes it special is what's known as the classic suggestion effect.
Right.
The classic suggestion effect, let's say I'm the hypnotist and you're the hypnotee, is that when you're experiencing the effect of my suggestions, your subjective experience is not that you're doing the responses, say lifting your arm or pretending to forget your name, but you're experiencing that as a happening. Your arm is lifting to a greater or lesser degree because of what I'm doing or saying, or the process, or what you're imagining. So the only thing that defines an interaction as hypnotic is a hypnotist giving suggestions which cue the classic suggestion effect. In other words, the defining characteristic is a subjective sense of non-volition, involuntariness, or automaticity. You're not just following instructions, you're not just complying, because that would feel like a doing.
Right.
But the whole thing is still a collaborative act.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And especially when we perform, you don't need to make it look that way. There's a kind of tipping point where it appears that the hypnotist has, some power that they could suggest anything now, and the result could be anything. And in truth, that's kind of what it looks like. But early on in this process, it began as an invitation to imagine in a particular way that changes your personal reality. That would kind of be how I put it. And
right.
I believe our personal reality is very liquid, very fluid, and we have an excessive belief in its solidity and its reliability.
Now, when you talk about, that's basically the essence of hypnosis, being able to change someone's subjective reality.
I think so.
This is a very broad thing to talk about. So, what most people, when they think about hypnosis, they see the hypnotist forcing the subject to do stuff, to act out certain roles. But thinking about it like that, being able to change someone's reality, what are some of the phenomena? What can we actually allow people to experience?
Well, almost anything that you can say, but I tend to categorize the hypnotic phenomena in this way. First of all, there are physical phenomena. There are things I can suggest that if you imagine around them, you will experience a physical response. So the classic things are imagining your hands are magnets and they come together, that they're being lifted for some reason, they lift automatically. That you can make people move around, you can make their eyes heavy, you can suggest things that seem to be about the body and their relationship to their physical experience in any given moment. The second class of suggestion, if you like, is aimed at the subject's emotional experience. So this may be that I can make them laugh, or make them out of control, or make them feel confused or excited. I can try to link often the physical. In fact, I'm always going to link these suggestions to each other, but I can link physical responses to emotional shifts. And again, that can be entertaining. Just suggesting that someone can't stop laughing is hilarious for people who are watching. There's just something about it. When the laughter is not, that's nice and it's quite amusing, but it's unbridled. It's off the hook. They can't control it. So we've got emotional suggestions. The third category I tend to call challenge suggestions. So this is where whatever it is that I'm suggesting, I get to a point of essentially asking you to fight against it. So rather than just making your hand lift, I may say try and keep it down, put some effort in, try and pull your hand down. Or if it's stuck to the table, try and lift your hand up. Or if you're, it's been suggested that you can't stop laughing, try and take it seriously. I mean it now, try and stop laughing. So if I can push essentially the same suggestions to the point where you experience, if you like, this non-volition I spoke about is displayed more clearly.
Right.
Then, although nothing's really changed, it's as if something shifted, because you are experiencing the classic suggestion effect in a more obvious way.
It's even more dissociated from your own experience.
So that's when it kind of starts to tick the box of how people sometimes think of hypnotism, that I'm making you do it.
Right.
It's not that I'm making you do it, it's that all of your responses actually are automatic, and I'm going to point your attention at some of those, change some of them with the assistance of your imagination, and we're going to get to a point where suddenly the scales kind of tip, and for a moment or for a time, despite the challenge to fight against it, you don't seem to be able to. And again, it's really just the subjective experience has changed. It's still your arm, your muscles, your imagination, but things kind of get a bit more black and white at that point. So that's why I call it a challenge suggestion. And again, this is a way of displaying what you've created. If you make someone stuck to the chair, then now you can try and stand up. If I offered you money, do you think you could take it? And an important thing to understand is that the challenging itself is really just another suggestion. By saying, you're a strong man, put some effort in, try and lift your hand, why would I be saying that if the outcome wasn't a particular outcome that's going to stay put? So although we're not in a lab doing research at this point, so I'm going to kind of display this as fairly as I can, but I'm going to, if I feel that it's going to be breached, then I can bring it back in again, and I can drop back to emotional suggestions or physical suggestions. Once I get to that kind of challenge point, the final category, and again it's very broad, I just call cognitive suggestions. So these are going to be things like having amnesia, forgetting everything you know about something, hallucinating in any sense, post-hypnotic suggestions, things that take effect after the hypnosis has occurred, and that kind of covers it. So if you think the highly hypnotizable person can hallucinate in any sense, let's just put aside the quality of what they're seeing, it's the vividness is not important. In the same way, I sometimes put it this way: if you're home alone and suddenly you saw what looked like a kind of ghost or something out the corner of your eye, even if you didn't believe in ghosts at all, but you looked and you were like, God, what's that? And you looked again and it was still there. how much substance would it actually need? You know,
Right,
you're not,
yeah.
or you think someone's in the house and it was just a creak of the floorboard. How real does this need to be? The point is your subjective relationship is the important point. Are your emotions following?
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I break down, and that is normally my progression through the phenomena.
Which actually brings us to